Good day, everyone. Me and Ms. Aspra will be the one to discuss about blood. We all know that blood is the river of life that surges within us. Blood serves as a vehicle for distributing body heat and for transporting nutrients, respiratory gases, and other substances throughout the body. Of all the substances within the human body, blood is the familiar one, as we've all had an injury that involves bleeding. If we lose enough of blood, of course, we die. So blood is technically considered a connective tissue, and it's the only fluid tissue in the body full of fibrous proteins. So it is comprised of formed elements, which are blood cells suspended in a fluid called plasma. If we place blood in a centrifuge, it will separate into its components. The densest section is comprised of erythrocytes or red blood cells. In the less dense section will be the yellowish plasma. They are separated by the buffy coat, a white layer containing platelets as well as leukocytes, otherwise known as white blood cells. So erythrocytes normally account for about 45% of the total volume of a blood sample, a percentage known as the hematocrit or blood fraction. White blood cells and platelets contribute less than 1%, and plasma makes up most of the remaining 55% of whole blood. As a whole, blood is responsible for distributing various substances around the body, most notably oxygen, which we can't survive very long without it. But it also carries nutrients absorbed from the digestive tract and hormones secreted by endocrine organs. Blood also delivers waste products to the organs that will dispose them, like the carbon dioxide that we exhale. Beyond this, blood serves to regulate pH in various tissues, maintains body temperature, and prevents infection. So these are the physical characteristics and volume of blood. Blood is a sticky, opaque fluid with a metallic taste. Color varies from scarlet or oxygen-rich to dark red or oxygen-poor. The pH of blood is 7.35 to 7.45. Specific gravity is 1050 or 1060. Temperature is 38 degrees Celsius, slightly higher than normal body temperature. Blood accounts for approximately 8% of body weight. Average volume of blood is 5 to 6 liters for males and 45 liters for females. Okay, so let's discuss each component of blood now. So let's begin with plasma. So plasma is a sticky fluid made mostly of water, but also containing a variety of proteins, nutrients, ions, gases, and hormones. Most plasma proteins are made by the liver. So the most abundant plasma protein is called albumin, which contributes significantly to plasma's osmotic pressure, and this is followed by a variety of globulin, which binds to certain molecules for transport. So moving to the form elements, these are erythrocytes or red blood cells. leukocytes or white blood cells, and platelets. Red blood cells and platelets are interesting and they don't possess all the typical organelles and they don't divide. They are replaced by stem cell in the bone marrow. Okay, erythrocytes or red blood cells are very numerous in the bloodstream and they are shaped like flattened disc with depressed centers. There is no nucleus and nothing much of anything inside other than lots of hemoglobin. So hemoglobin, this is the protein that allows for the transport of oxygen throughout the bloodstream, which is picked up in the lungs and then released for tissue cells throughout the body. So this is the structure of hemoglobin. It is made of the protein called globin, consisting of 4 polypeptides, 2 identical alpha chains, and 2 identical beta chains. Each is bound to a heme group with iron at the center. Okay, so the iron in this heme is able to bind to an oxygen molecule in reversible fashion so that it can bind and then release when necessary. So each hemoglobin can bind 4 oxygen molecules. And there are around 250 million hemoglobin per red blood cell. So one red blood cell can transport 1 billion oxygen molecules. Homeostatic imbalance. So the hemostatic imbalance is anemia. So this is a decrease in the oxygen carrying ability of the blood. Whatever the reason is anemia or lacking blood, anemia may be the result of first, a lower than normal number of red blood cells, or second, abnormal or deficient hemoglobin content in the red blood cells. So there are several types of anemia, but one of these is a sickle cell anemia. So this deserves a little more attention because people with this genetic disorder are frequently seen in hospital emergency rooms. In sickle cell anemia, the abnormal hemoglobin form becomes spiky and sharp when the red blood cells unload oxygen molecules or when the oxygen content of the blood is lower than normal. As during vigorous exercise, anxiety, or other stressful situations, the stiff deformed. It will turn into crescent shape. Erythrocytes rupture easily and clamp up in a small blood vessels. So these events interfere with oxygen delivery, leaving victims gasping for air and cause extreme pain. So it is amazing that this havoc results from a change in just one of the amino acids in 2 of the 4 polypeptide chains of the hemoglobin. So the one that I discussed earlier. So this sickle cell anemia occurs chiefly in black people who live in the malaria belt of Africa and among their descendants. So this is the normal blood of a person, and this is when a person is anemic. So as you can see, it lacks of blood, and this is polycythemia. So polycythemia is an excessive or abnormal increase in the number of erythrocytes. So so you can see it in the picture, the blood is higher than normal blood. Polycythemia may result from bone marrow cancer or polycythemia vera. So next is leukocytes or white blood cells. So, which unlike the far more abundant red blood cells, leukocytes are complete cells with nuclei and organelles. Leukocytes are part of the immune system. Leukocytes help us defend against pathogens and other harmful things. These use the circulatory system to get around the body, but they can also slip out into other connective tissues to do their work. That process called diapedesis or leaping across. There are two types of white blood cells. These are granulocytes and agranulocytes, which differ in the presence or absence of granules. The three types of granulocytes are the neutrophils, which kill bacteria, eosinophils, which kill parasitic worms, and basophils, which contain histamine that attract other white blood cells. Granulocytes, on the other hand, can be lymphocytes, which can fight viruses and tumors. Also give rise to plasma cells, which produce antibodies. Or they can be monocytes, which become macrophages that can eat up intruders. Lastly, we get to the platelets. These are platelets. These are the fragments of large cells called megakaryocytes. So these fragments are essential during blood clotting, which happens when blood vessels are damaged, as platelets can clog up any holes or tears to seal things off. So they flow to the bloodstream in an inactive state unless needed. So they die every 10 days or so and constantly regenerated. So the normal platelet count in blood is about 300,000 cells per milliliter. So let's move on to hematopoiesis. Red blood cells are formed in a red bone marrow of bones. Stem cells in a red bone marrow are called hemocytoblasts. They give lives to all formed elements in blood. So you already know what are those formed elements. So the hemocytoblast forms two types of descendants. The lymphoid stem cell, which produces lymphocytes, and the myeloid stem cell, which can produce all other classes of formed elements. So next is the hemostasis. So hemostasis is the process by which the body will stop bleeding through vascular spasm, platelet plug formation, and then coagulation or blood clotting. So this essentially means that where there is damage to a vessel, smooth muscle will contract. Platelets will plug the tear, and then a protein called fibrin will form a mesh to patch everything up. So once the vessel has healed, the clot is removed through a process called fibrinolysis, so that there is no blockage in the vessel. So disorders of hemostasis. The two major disorders of hemostasis or undesirable clot formation and bleeding disorders. So let's first discuss the undesirable clotting. So despite the body's safeguards against abnormal clotting, undesirable clots sometimes form in intact or unbroken blood vessels, particularly in the legs. A clot that develops and persists in an unbroken blood vessels is called thrombus. If the thrombus is large enough, it may prevent blood from flowing to the cells beyond the blockage. For example, if the blockage forms in the blood vessels serving the heart, the consequences may be death of heart muscle and a fatal heart attack. So, if a thrombus breaks away from the vessel wall and floats freely in the bloodstream, it becomes an embolus. So, an embolus is usually no problem unless or until it lodges in a blood vessel too narrow for it to pass through. For example, a cerebral embolus may cause a stroke. So next disorder is bleeding disorder. The most common causes of abnormal bleeding are platelet deficiency or thrombocytopenia and deficits of some of the clotting factors, such as might result from impaired liver function or certain genetic conditions. Thrombocytopenia results from an insufficient number of circulating platelets. Even normal movements cause spontaneous bleeding from small blood vessels. So another bleeding disorder is hemophilia. So hemophilia applies to several different hereditary bleeding disorders, so means it can be inherited or heritable. Hemophilia results from a lack of any of the factors needed for clotting. It is commonly called bleeder's disease. The hemophilias have similar signs and symptoms that begin early in life. Even minor tissue trauma results in prolonged bleeding and can be life-threatening. Repeated bleeding in the joints causes them to become disabled and painful. So, that's all for my part. The rest will be discussed by Ms. Aspra. Thank you.